We'll get started in just a minute. In the meantime, if you want to go to eclipsesoundscapes.org, we have a new tab up, which is Did you receive my data? We have a online spreadsheet there showing all the data that we have received and processed so far. That's one of the things we'll be talking about. It takes a while to process all of the great data that we've been sent in. So if you wonder if we've gotten your data yet or not, and if it's in the system, you can go to the main webpage and check the status. All right, well, it is 4:30, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar. We wanted to give everybody an update after the eclipse on where we are and where we're going next. My name is Dr. Henry Winter, but everybody just calls me Trey, and I am the Chief Scientist and co-lead for the Eclipse Soundscapes Project. We also have Mary Kay Severino online as well. She will be answering questions in the Q&A as they come up and helping with the technical issues. Kelsey Parrott is usually on these things. She was unable to make it today, but you probably know Kelsey if you've ever sent an email to info@eclipsesoundscapes.org or outreach@arisalab.org. She's the one that's really been helping a lot of helping everybody and answering a lot of the questions that you've been having. So with that said, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about where we are with the Eclipse Soundscapes project after the eclipse. Oh, and I should mention too, before I go any further, if you have any questions as we go through, please put them in the Q&A. Mary Kay will be answering questions as they come in the Q&A, and I will be answering some live as we go, but please use that Q&A feature to ask questions. We prefer that to the chat. It's just a little bit easier to keep up with all of the questions. So, thank you for everyone who participated in the Eclipse Soundscapes project. We had more participants than we ever could have imagined. Here are some of our participation updates. As you know, we had many different roles, many different ways you could participate in Eclipse Soundscapes. And we had over 3,425 people learning about eclipses using our online resources. That's amazing. We weren't really expecting to hit those numbers. We also had 3,373 observers recording their multisensory experiences during the eclipse and reporting it back to us. That number is actually growing. Most people have by now sent in their observations using the Eclipse Soundscapes Observer Survey form, but we're still getting some trickling in. So that number is now still slowly going up, but it's still increasing. So we're looking forward to compiling all that information and learning more about how everyone experienced the eclipse. Lastly, the Eclipse Soundscapes data collectors, people who actually had AudioMoth devices, either ones that we sent out or people who had their own and registered them through us in our system. We had 770 devices registered, and out of that, 394 people submitted their location notes online. And I think we've got almost that many SD cards, the memory cards, received in. We haven't done a complete counting of that because they keep on coming in every day. So again, these numbers are really large. They are more than what we actually expected them to be, and that's great because the more data we have, the more questions we can ask, and more precisely. So again, thank you everybody for participating in this. This really would not have been possible without your involvement, and that's one of the reasons why we at ARISA Lab and NASA as well really focuses on these participant science projects. It used to be called citizen science. Because there's a lot of science that we just can't do unless everybody gets involved and everybody participates. So we really appreciate all of the work that you did leading up to the eclipse. So that's all the numbers and what we've gotten in. And just talking a little bit more about what we are doing now with the observer role. Oh, and if you haven't noticed, this is just a very informal update seminar or webinar. So this isn't extremely formal. This is just letting you know where we're at and what the next steps of each process is. So as I mentioned before, we received 3,373 observer role submissions via the survey form. That data actually needs to be cleaned somewhat. Some people didn't quite understand the instructions for latitude and longitude, or they were using devices that instead of reporting latitude and longitude in decimal degrees, they reported it in degrees, minutes, and seconds. So we have to get everything in the same format so that we can process that. So we currently have people going through all the different survey responses and making sure that the latitudes and longitudes are all in the same format so that we can process that data. We're also finding, a bunch of obvious but minor errors. A lot of people don't realize what their latitude and longitude is, and when they entered in their longitude, they didn't realize that the longitude is actually negative instead of positive. So we had a lot of people reporting from Timbuktu how great the eclipse was. And of course, nobody in Timbuktu actually were able to experience this particular eclipse. And it turns out if you just flip the negative sign to make the longitude negative, it is then someplace in North America where the eclipse was visible. So again, we kind of have to go through and do this manual cleaning effort to make sure that everything makes sense, that we understand what these errors probably are, that we tag any data that might have some obvious errors. So we're going through all of that. After that, we are going to organize the data, and we have some tools that let us determine based on your location how much of an eclipse you experienced. Was it a total eclipse? Was it a partial eclipse? And what percentage of the eclipse was observable at that different location? And that actually helps us understand how much of an eclipse is necessary for some of the different impressions that people have. We are also determining whether we're going to be working with some biologists at North Carolina State University on analyzing this data. They worked with us with the annular eclipse, and now we are making a little bit more of a refined research plan on how we are going to use the data. Oh, and I see that Kelsey is online. Hello, Kelsey. So with working with them, it's a great process, but we kind of needed to know how much data we were going to get in, what the data types were going to be, and we need to clean it before we can actually do those next steps and actually determining how we're going to collaborate. So stay tuned for more information on how we're going to be using all of the data that observers sent us via the online survey form. Okay, so that was the observer role. Now we get into the data collector role. And if you were a data collector, you know that we asked you to send in your micro SD card. If you got the kit from us, we gave you a mailer. If you had your own, you were kind of on your own how you send us the SD card. This is, and so the image at the top left is the image of the first wave of SD cards that we got in. We received hundreds of SD cards within a week or so of the eclipse. And since all this data is physical, there is a lot of sorting that has to be involved to actually, put all this data in the right place, put it so that we can start entering it into our systems. So we've been working hard with Mary Kay doing a lot of this work of actually sorting all of those envelopes that we've been getting to determine if the SD ID matches up on the envelope, matches up with somebody who filled out the survey form and gave us their latitude and longitude information. And if you, as you can see from the right middle picture, there are you can see the sorting process of all of the return labels being stacked numerically, and Mary Kay's sorting assistant, Ruby the cat, being extremely helpful because some of those envelopes were in a box, and if you have a cat, you know that if you have a box open, the box is the cat's. The cat will be in the box. So always getting help wherever we can, sorting this information. And now and the last step in the sorting it is putting it into a group of different bins. So some of the bins are, one of the bins is, do we have all the information we need to start processing the data? And that's primarily location data, and we know the start time from when the recordings were taken. Then there's another one where we've got all the information in, but we've got all the SD card and stuff in, but we don't know yet if we've gotten the submission for the latitude and longitude. That might be on a slip of paper inside the envelope. We asked everybody to do that as a backup. So, that just requires another step or two before we start analyzing it. And then another batch where it's going to take a little bit more of processing work to actually go through it. So we're trying to sort everything out so that we can do the easy stuff really quickly and get some preliminary results out into the world and share with you. And then some of the ones that's going to take a little bit more time to process, we've got those separated out. We are going to process all of these. We're going to be using as much of the data as possible in order to do the experiments that we want to do. But we want to get some results out quickly, and that's why we are kind of doing this grouping so that we can, everything that is perfect and ready to go, we can just use that immediately and get some preliminary results. And then we can take a little bit more time with the data that might require us reaching out to you and asking a few more questions or finding that latitude and longitude and things like that. So it is going to take us several weeks to process this data. As I mentioned, the top left image showing a box of many, many, many SD cards, and then another bag, a clear bag that is just full of envelopes with SD cards. That was the first wave. We have gotten 2 other waves of data with almost that number. So we're receiving hundreds and hundreds of data cards that have to be sorted and go through this process. So we know that everybody wants to see the results, or everybody wants to have access to the results of all the hard work that they did. And we want to give that to you as quickly as possible. But we're asking you to be just a little patient with us because this is a lot of information for us group to go through. Oh, and as Mary Kay mentioned in the chat, we are showing 3 boxes for just, reference purposes. There are actually many, many, many stacks of those boxes that are actually in our offices. So it's far, far more than the 3 boxes. That's just showing the 3 different general categories that we are sorting all of that physical data into. Okay, so again, we're just going to quickly mention that we are constantly updating our page with the data that we've received as we sort through it. So if you go to eclipsesoundscapes.org, there's a series of tabs: participation stats, submit your observations and data, did you receive my data, what's next, and more NASA. If you go to the did you receive my data, you'll get some information about what we're doing with the data, and there will be a online spreadsheet that you can view to see if we have processed your data yet. Now, if you have sent in data to us and it's not on there, do not panic. It is taking us, as I said before, a while to get through all of this data and to properly sort it. And as we sort it, we are updating that web page. So keep on checking back with that web page. If you have any specific questions, you can go to or ask them at info@eclipsesoundscapes.org. But don't start asking yet if I sent in my data and I don't see in the spreadsheet, did I not receive it? It still might not be there. We have processed, I'm going to say, somewhere about a third to a half of all the SD cards that we've received so far. And it's going to take us another couple of weeks to go through and sort the rest. So again, please be a little patient with us. We're going through this as quickly as we can, but we are actually somewhat victims of our own success. We've received, we had a lot more people participate, which is absolutely great. And it's just taking us a little bit longer than we originally planned to go through. So keep on checking this spreadsheet, and we will be sending out another notice once we have all of the cards that we have in hand processed and on that spreadsheet. And at that time, if you don't see your data on that spreadsheet, that's when you reach out to us and say, hey, I sent it in on this date and I should have gotten to you by now, but I don't see it here. And we will try to answer those as much as we can. Okay. And to the next slide. All right. So we wanted to talk with you a little bit about what we are doing with this data and information as we get it in. And what we need to do is, as we are getting it and processing it, if we've got the latitude and longitude, we want to start doing another sort and organizing it by eclipse types. As you may remember, the scientific experiment that we're running, the science question we're trying to ask, is how do eclipses impact wildlife? And specifically, how do eclipses impact the how crickets behave? Do they react as if it is a sunset? Do they react differently? Do they start singing? So in order to do that, it's important for us to know how much of an eclipse is experienced in each data set, because we need to know if it requires a total eclipse to have a change in eclipses responses, or if 99% actually has a change. So we need to know where these data not only are physically, but where the data are along the path of totality, and how much of an eclipse was experienced at the site of each recording. So we have a tool. It's called the Eclipse Data Tool, and it's a version of the Eclipse information page. So on our website, you could actually get how much of an eclipse you would experience at your latitude and longitude or within your zip code. There's a more detailed version of that tool. And if you're familiar with GitHub, it is on GitHub. The link is below. That is https://github.com/arisa-lab-llc/eclipse-data-tool. It is a JavaScript tool, so it runs in a web browser. Everything that we do at ARISA Lab and everything that we do with our NASA partners and for Eclipse Soundscapes is free and open source. So feel free to go to that link, and hopefully Mary Kay or Kelsey can put that link in the chat. And if you go to that link, you can download the data tool that we use to determine all the information that is on the little bit of a spreadsheet below. So we have to create these spreadsheets that let us know the Eclipse Soundscapes ID number for each recording site. The latitude and longitude is something that you give us, and then from that we can determine if that recording site was in a partial or a total eclipse, and then the percent coverage of an eclipse that I got, whether it's 100% for a total eclipse, or in this example, we've got a partial at 93% and 77.57% and so on. And that's important for us to know how much of an eclipse was at that recording site, so that when we start measuring the response of crickets and other animals, we know if they were in totality or not. You might not be familiar with the terms in the others. First contact is an astronomer's term, and that is the time when the eclipse starts. So not the total eclipse, but when the moon first starts to appear in front of the sun and blocking the sun. So that's called first contact. It's the first, quote, contact of the moon with the sun. Second contact is something that only happens if you have a total eclipse or an annular eclipse. And second contact is when the moon either completely blocks the sun, the first moment the moon completely blocks the sun, in a total solar eclipse, or in an annular eclipse when the moon is actually kind of in that center region of the sun, and you can see this annulus or ring of the sun around the moon. Third contact, again, is something that you only have during a total or annular eclipse, and that is the first instant where totality ends. So the total eclipse is over. If you were observing the eclipse visually, the total eclipse, that would be the point where you put your glasses back on, right? Where it's no longer safe to look at the sun directly. And then the fourth contact time is when the entire eclipse ends, the moon has moved away from the sun completely, and there's no more eclipse going on. And then the last one is the maximum phase time, and that's just when the eclipse is at its maximum. So that's a point for a total eclipse between second contact and third contact, when the moon is just like perfectly aligned and blocking out all of the sun. So we need those times, right? Because what we are doing is we are comparing the time of the total eclipse in a region, right? So it's that second contact time to third contact time. So during that eclipse time, what is happening during the eclipse? You know, what do we hear? What's the wildlife doing? You know, how are their vocalizations responding to the eclipse? But to know if it's a major change from their normal behavior, we have to also look at that exact same time the day before the eclipse and 2 days before the eclipse. So that's why we had everybody record multiple days, because we, as scientists, we need this thing called a baseline. So if there wasn't any eclipse, if there wasn't anything impacting, you know, the wildlife, what are things normally like at this exact same time? Because you don't want other factors actually, you know, making your data dirty, right? So we can't use like early in the day because maybe, you know, the sun hasn't risen yet, or there are other factors that impact that habitat at different times of the day. So the best that we can do is to make sure that we look at that same little bit of time, typically about 3 to 4 minutes during the eclipse, but at that time on the 2 days previous, right? And that's where we are going to use as our baseline to determine if a change occurs. And again, you can generate spreadsheets like this too. If you're a nerd like me and you want to do stuff like that, please go to our GitHub. The link is now in the chat, and you can download our Eclipse data tool. All right, so once we've got all of the information sorted and we've got these spreadsheets filled in, then it's time to actually start putting the data into our system for analysis. Again, this is going to take us some time. Please be a little patient with us. As I mentioned before, we need to pull out that from all of the data that you took, we're going to pull out those relevant 3 to 4 minutes of audio for each of the 2 days before the eclipse and on eclipse day. And we have to do that by manually entering in each SD card into a computer. And the picture on the left middle shows my laptop and its little laptop stand with a hub underneath it with a MicroSD card reader. What we do is we put the card in, and then it's checked by my laptop, and then it's entered into a different system where it's backed up, recorded, and is ready for analysis. If you are interested more in the details of the data processing and what goes on during that process, we will be having another webinar where we talk about the data flow and all of the steps involved with that. For this webinar, the main thing we want to get across is that it is a human actually putting in hundreds and hundreds of SD cards into a micro SD reader and then uploading that data to our system. So again, please be patient with us, because anytime you have a human doing something manually, that's where the process takes a little bit more time. As soon as we get the data uploaded and we have it in a form where we can start sharing, we will make an announcement via our mailing list that the data is up and available for sharing. And one of the ways that we're going to share that data with you, hopefully very quickly, is via YouTube. So we have a YouTube channel. If you've gone through any of our trainings, you've probably gone through some of our YouTube videos, where our YouTube training videos. We have a system now that, as we put the data in, it automatically analyzes the data. It finds those significant times that we were talking about, and then it extracts that 3 to 4 minutes of data during the eclipse day, the day before, and then 2 days before, and makes a series of YouTube videos that you can access and listen to your data. So this is the first way that we are going to make the data public and available to you. You can find your data by searching for your ESID number, and it should be there and in a few weeks. So it's taking us a while to actually go through and get all this data. So the process is in the works now, and we're just now starting to upload data. It's not there yet. It's got to be approved and go through a little bit of a system, but it should start appearing on YouTube next week. Again, we will send out an email blast letting you know, hey, the data is starting to appear on YouTube. You can go through and actually start to listen to the data that you recorded. After this YouTube process, that's what we want to get the data out so that you can start listening to it and interacting with your data immediately. And after that, we are going to make all of the data available on an online server system. Oh, and I just had a note. Yes, I mean the annular data. Sorry, the annular data should be online next week. It will take us a couple of weeks to a month later to get all of the total solar eclipse data on the YouTube system, because we are still going through the whole process of going through and sorting and processing it. So please, it may take weeks to months. We will announce when the data is being uploaded via the web channels. Let's see. Okay, so the project is not over yet. This really gathering all the data and getting all the data is really step one. I know a lot of people think that with the eclipse over, the project is kind of over, but no, the project is actually just getting started. We are going to have a series of webinars throughout the year. We're going to be talking about why we are doing this, why soundscapes are important. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we're going to have a little bit more in-depth talks about what we are doing with the data, not only how we are using it and storing it and sharing it, but also to how we are doing the analysis. What scientific techniques and measurements are we using, and what can we actually get from the data? And lastly, we are working with lots of our NASA partners, such as Globe Observer Eclipse, who actually did a lot of research on the temperature changes during the eclipse. And one of the things that we're interested in learning is, do these temperature changes also have an effect on wildlife behavior? So we'll be hopefully having somebody from Globe Observer talking with us on how we can learn by actually using our data alongside the data that other people were collecting during the eclipse as well. The other main thing is that we will have a data analyst role that will be opening up soon. And that is where we will be asking for your help to actually help scientists go through this data, start to listen to it, and add more what we call metadata to the data, more information about the data. We are still working on the format and platform for that. We are testing out a few options. We have a few criteria. One, we need to do real and meaningful analysis, and we need to do it in a way that volunteers can actually help us do that analysis, in a way that isn't, too difficult to learn, doesn't require that much training, but also too that is accessible. And it's that last element that really actually makes things somewhat difficult. We are actually doing lots of user testing right now to make sure that all those tools are usable and accessible. So please stay tuned. We will be sending out more updates when that becomes available. And that's really what we had prepared for today. We just wanted to give a very quick overview of what we're doing, what we're up to, and what's coming up next, and let keep everybody in the loop with what's going on, let you know that the project isn't over yet, and that we are, we've got a lot more work to do ahead of us, and that we're hoping that you will stay with us. Please, if you haven't already, sign up for the newsletter. We try not to spam you, but we will let you know when these other parts of the project come online, and we will let you know the results of the data that we find as well. And with that, I am going to stop talking and take some questions, because I see that the Q&A has actually been quite busy while I've been rattling on. So, Mary Kay or Kelsey, are there any questions I should answer live or?
This is Mary Kay. I can mention a few things that we answered in the chat that other people might be wondering. Some people wondered if they can still submit their data collector information online. Yes. And someone also asked if they weren't sure of the time, should they estimate? I would say leave it blank if you don't know, and definitely be exact with latitude and longitude if you can. Another thing to mention, we are not accepting observer role late submission, so the observer role is closed. So no more of those submissions, but we appreciate all of the ones that came in. And a couple other people asked if we would like the AudioMoths back. That is up to you. We are going to work on finding places to donate them via other participatory science projects or libraries or other locations. So you could certainly send it back to us if you would like to, and we will find a place for it, or you could try donating it to your library or nearby school for their library of things. So those are just a couple of questions that popped up, and I'll let Kelsey kind of jump in and mention anything that she answered that she thinks might be useful. And actually, sorry, before I do, I see that Susan Korfman has raised their hand. So Susan, if you want to ask your question out loud.
I didn't intend to raise my hand. I'm sorry.
It's quite all right.
All right, I'll send it back to Kelsey to see if she has any questions that came out that she thinks we should share out loud.
Yeah, apologies if you already answered this, Trey, but maybe we can do a little refresher. We've had some people ask if there was an issue with their data, maybe their recorder didn't go for the whole time, their batteries died, something like that happened, and they didn't record the full window as expected. How will that data be used in our process?
Okay, so that's a good question. So things happen. One of the reasons why it was important to have such a large cohort of data collectors was it's just hard to plan what might happen, what might not happen. Please, if something went wrong with the data, if the batteries died for some reason, or if you didn't record the full day before, or the full 2 days before in the Eclipse day, please send the data in anyway. This project has a couple of purposes. The main purpose is to answer the scientific question around the eclipse, and do eclipses have impacts on wildlife? Yes, that is our primary goal, and your data might not be able to help us answer that question if it didn't get both days before the eclipse and the day of the eclipse. However, the secondary purpose of this project is to create one of the largest soundscapes recording archives that has ever been made. Scientists will be using this data for a wide variety of purposes in the future, and the data that you provide will still be helpful to scientists using these to study other effects as well. Your data may be in a region that is similar to other regions or different, and it's important to know how your particular soundscape is different than other soundscapes and other habitats. One of the things that we learned in this project is that every habitat is unique and different. So the information that you give us can still be used, even if it's not used for this specific scientific question. So please, if you've got data, but it doesn't seem like maybe it's complete, or if something went wrong, please send it in anyway. We will categorize it as best we can. And I am sure that there is a scientist somewhere who would love to have access to your data.
I'll pop in with another question. So well, a comment and then a question. I just put a link to Open Acoustic Devices in the webinar chat, as well as an answer to someone's question. And so, Trey, can you tell us a little bit more about what people might be able to find on Open Acoustic Devices as it relates to the AudioMoth and their future work with their AudioMoth?
Right. So for this project, we tried to keep everything as simple as possible. So everybody's AudioMoth was set the same. You had to do very little prep work with it before you could deploy it. If you go to Open Acoustic Devices, and this is the group that actually designed the AudioMoth, you can find out not only more on how you can use it, but you can download free software that lets you interact with your AudioMoth in ways that we did not use for this project. One of the amazing things about the AudioMoths is that you can actually, if you set it up in a particular way, you can actually record the echolocation of bats. It's kind of like sonar, so it uses sound waves. But we couldn't set that up for this project because it would have been a little bit too complicated. So if you go to that site that's in the chat, you can actually learn more about not only how the device works, but you can download the software so that you can change the configuration of the device so that it can record longer, it can record at only a certain type of day or a certain time of day, or you can change the frequency ranges so that it can go up and listen to the bat echolocation. The thing about that is that since it has to sample far more quickly, it will actually drain your battery and your data card extremely quickly. So you can also learn how to make your own AudioMoth if soldering is a thing that you enjoy. You can also learn how to tinker with your AudioMoth and add different elements to it as well. So if you want to keep your AudioMoth and if you want to do your own science experiments or use them in a classroom, I highly recommend that you go to that openacousticdevices.info site. Everything is free and open source, and you can learn anything from like creating your own AudioMoth from scratch with electronic components to adjusting it so that you can do the exact soundscape recording project that you want to do with it. See. Were there any other major lingering questions? I see that several people are excited to see the data analysis. Let me tell you, I am too. This project has been a labor of love and lack of sleep for many years. And really getting the data in, this point that have experienced up to now, this is the halfway point. And we really hope that you're excited enough to stick with us for the next half, which is actually, now that we've got all the data in, going through the entire analysis process with it and learning something about the natural world around us that we didn't know before. I very much expect that we will answer our scientific question, but the work that we're doing with all this data will actually open up hundreds of more questions that we didn't even know to ask before we got this data set in. If we didn't, the amount of recording locations we've gotten is one of the largest single day recordings ever done. I have not seen, I don't want to say the largest because I haven't looked at all of the Soundscapes recordings ever done, but it's the largest I have ever seen. And since we were all doing it at the same time, that gives us some information that scientists just have not had access to before. So we have a science advisory board that have Soundscapes ecologists on it, and they are chomping at the bit to actually get at this data and learn more about it. So as we talk with them and as we get this data processed, and during the slow process of sorting and uploading and processing, and the very slow process of getting things on YouTube, again, expect that to take weeks to months to get things trickling into there. And then finding the best ways to have everyone participate in the data analysis. All of these things are really leading up to something that I hope, well, that I find to be very exciting. And I hope that you find to be very exciting as well. So not to keep everybody later than they have to, once again, I want to thank everybody for participating in this project. I can't believe what a response that we've gotten to this. It has been absolutely great. And one of the things that we are really going to do with the rest of the life of this project is to keep on doing these webinars, keep you informed of what's going on with all the hard work that you put into the project, and let you know how you can keep on working with NASA, either through this project or through other projects in the future. So with that, Mary Kay or Kelsey, is there anything that you want to add?
No, I think that's about it.
Nope, not for me either.
All right, so we are going to have any last minute questions before I pronounce this webinar well and truly done. Going once, going twice. All right. Oh, and I'm really glad there's several people that have commented how much fun this was. I am really glad that you enjoyed this. I'm a nerd, I'm a scientist. I love doing this stuff. And it's always nice for me to hear that other people enjoy it too. Like I said, stay tuned. We're not going to spam you, but the next thing that comes up, the next way that you can participate or engage with us or other NASA scientists, we will be letting you know. And with that, have a great rest of your day, everyone.